This your boy Kendrick Dean, aka Wyldcard, and you're now checking out YouKnowIGotSoul.com.
First off, I just want to thank you, for taking the time to do the interview, man.
I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Yeah, man, because I was going through your discography a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, damn, this guy's produced pretty much every one of my favorite songs. So it's just a great honor just to speak with you, man.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. So, first off, how did you get your start in the music industry, and how did that eventually lead to you working with Beatcox?
Well, I always like to take it all the way back to when I first started music, period.
Okay.
I might have been like 2 years old, and my godmother bought me a little play school drum set. And I banged on that thing till I broke the head maybe in a couple of days. There was a piano around my grandfather's house that I always would play, and as a kid, and he was just like, you know what? I need to get him his own piano. So when I was maybe about 11 or 12, my grandfather bought me my first piano. We put it in our house, and I started taking lessons, classical music, jazz music, and I also was in special gifted music programs in school. So I would take theory and all that stuff, and in elementary school and middle school and up to high school, and I'd take jazz band, and also I would play in the church. So my musical background is pretty solid and pretty extensive and eclectic in the sense that I've studied jazz, I've studied classical violin in middle school, and of course contemporary gospel and traditional gospel in church. So that's how I started with music. In terms of production and getting into the business, my parents bought me my first sequencer when I was maybe 15 years old. It was an Ensoniq KS32. And what I would do is I would listen to my favorite songs on the radio, and I would record them, tape back then, and try to make a soundtrack, just instrumental, of the music, and just break it down and recreate it. And it gave me experience on how to actually produce songs through, composition, through musical composition. I took that knowledge, and in college, I bought a new keyboard, a Motif 7. No, I'm sorry, a Motif 6, which I still have to this day. And I did a lot of my sequences in there. I did talent shows and backed up a lot of singers in college and whatnot. And after college, I was kind of left in a dilemma. I mean, I had a degree in history, and I was like, do I take this and I go to law school, or do I do something else? Deep down inside of me, the passion was burning to do music. But I have a very, very, very tight family that's really, really strict on education and getting a career, getting a job, and working that for several years and retiring and being all good. Mm-hmm. So that mindset was always implanted in me. But at the same time, I had this tug. So I had a dilemma. I had to figure out what I was going to do. What I decided to do was to wait a year after graduation and figure some things out. I took a few temporary jobs. I went back home to Miami, and I thought, I'll just weigh my options. What am I going to really do? Am I going to go to law school? And if I go to law school, I'm not really going to give this music thing a shot, or at least have a chance to, because my head's going to be buried in books. I decided to go the route of education, which is a career that my father retired from as a principal. And I knew I was very good at public speaking. I knew I was very good with the youth, because I did some education programs while I was in high school and a couple in college. So it was something that wasn't far-fetched, but it was also a career that would have allowed me the space to have my weekends and my holidays and the short days, and I can, invest that time into music. So what I would do a lot of times after work, after I got a job as a teacher, after work I would go home and just sit on my my Motif at the time and just create until it was morning time to go back to school or go back to work. Brian came in the picture. He and I are cousins. A lot of people don't know that, but we grew up together. I remember summers he would come over to Miami, because he grew up in Houston, but he was born in Miami. He would come over and spend a lot of time with me and have this little Walkman and have, Babyface, Bobby Brown, the Ghostbusters soundtrack. And these were things at the time I wasn't really fully exposed to. I had being in Miami, I had the Miami-based experience, and of course, growing up in the church, I had a lot of the church influence. So I didn't really have a lot of full exposure to the Bobby Browns and the Babyface until Brian really introduced me to them. And ironically, Babyface is my probably biggest influence in my music. So anyway, he would come over and play those tapes, and we would rock to them, and I would enjoy it. And he would go back to Houston, and I always kept in touch with him. So as I went into the teaching profession, he would call me up and be like, or we would call each other and be like, hey, what are you doing? You still doing music? And I would say, like, well, I'm kind of, dabbling here and there. He was like, come on, man, let me hear what you got. Cause, I know we're into music really tight when we were young. We would play in church. We would swap instruments a lot of times. He would play drums, I'd play piano, and we'll switch. I'd play piano, I play drums and he played piano. And so he knew that something had to still be there. So I just made him a CD and sent it on up to him in Atlanta at that time. And he was like, man, Kendrick, you're dope, man. I definitely want you to come up here. So I started a slow transition from teaching into the music. What I would do is a lot of times I would leave work like 2:30, 3:30 in the afternoon. And it would be maybe say like a Thursday. And I would take a drive to Atlanta. At that time, I was teaching in Orlando, so the drive was a 6-hour drive. I would get there at like 9 o'clock, 9:30, and I would go into the studio where Brian was, and he was actually currently working in session. So I would just sit in the corner and just observe, just take notes until about midnight, and I had to hop right back in my car and drive all the way back to Orlando, get ready and shower, and just enough time to get to work on time. So I did that several times with no really no real, commitment or I would say no real dire straits. I have to get in on a record while I'm here. It was more so a focus. I need to learn as much as I can learn. I need to watch and observe, and I'm willing to sacrifice hours of sleep, my body, and everything just to be able to be in a position and to be in a position like Brian is at the time and what was at the time. And he saw that drive and desire. He just extended an offer for me to move up here and to work with him. I told him, hey, look, I gotta think about this. Although I knew him up in the back of my mind, I'm gonna come up here anyway. I'm not turning this opportunity down, but at the same time, I didn't want to be a burden on Brian financially or otherwise. So I had to make sure that I was, all together. So I deferred my last year of teaching. I taught for 2 years. I deferred my checks, and which basically means every 2 weeks you get less than what you would normally get, and then the remainder of that or the balance of that will be stored up for the summer, and you would get a lump check. So I decided to defer my checks, and in 2004, I took that lump check in the summer, and I relocated to Atlanta with that. Brian was so gracious to make available his townhouse for me to live in, and I in turn, even though he was like, I don't want no rent, I still gave him rent because I felt like, this is an opportunity, and I'm investing, not only in myself, but just in what we're doing together. So, I looked at it as, hey, this is something we get to do together that we haven't done in a long time. So I'm very excited and very gifted and gifted by that. I felt like it was a gift, and I'm blessed. So I did that, and within the first, I'd say, month, it was like all glorious. Like, we had so many tracks that we created, and I got my first placement, which was Destiny's Child. Destiny's Child's last album was called Destiny's Fulfilled, and Bad Habit was on that album, and that turned out to be a first Grammy nominated project for me. So it happened really, really quickly, and I definitely would be remiss not to acknowledge the mass amount of knowledge and help and aid that Brian has given me and gave me when I first got on, in terms of that being such a significant contribution to my early success. And I'm just really thankful. I was really thankful for that opportunity, and I was hungry, man. I mean, we would just stay day in, day out, no sleep in the studio, just creating, because I just wanted it, man. Whatever I got to do. I got to write. I got to play, the piano. What I got to do. You know what I'm saying? I need to do it so I could make a mark, because at the same time I had the pressure of the family still, wanting me to do a career for a long time and, retire and have a job in education. So by me up and going and saying, hey, I'm quitting my job teaching and going to do music, I had a couple relatives that thought I was a little cuckoo. So, I was committed to making it work. And I mean, it's worked since. And I'm very, very satisfied and very happy that I am where I am in my career 7 years later. And, looking forward to, the greatness that precedes me.
Wow, that's crazy, man. Tell me about your nickname, Wyldcard, and where it originated from.
Wildcard is a name that I actually coined for myself
Okay.
a few years back. And basically, I'm a big sports fan, and particularly a big football fan. I'm Miami-Dade County all day. So Miami Dolphins usually, throughout my adolescence, always made the playoffs as a wild card. And everybody kind of gave wild card teams a little bit of, slack. You guys are not that good to make it as a first seed. You're a wild card, but at the same time, there's an old adage that said on any given Sunday, anybody could win. So the wild card represented kind of like the underdog that might be slept on, but he or she has the same tools and the same gifts as anybody else, and they can win on any given Sunday. I also made a parody with the card game or card games, and typically in any card games, the person that holds a wild card or the wild card usually wins the game. So that's kind of how I coined that name. Kind of coming out of nowhere, so to speak, but with the mindset of dominating, and changing the game really quickly. In recent months, I'm actually maturing and transitioning from wild card and going more by my full name, Kendrick Dean. And I think it's just a maturation. I think everybody goes through it. Dwayne Wade went from Flash now to just Dwayne Wade, and I definitely feel like wild card has had its run, and this is a new kind of like a new phase of my career, and I have different outlooks now. I have an artist that I'm grooming, and I'm doing a lot more things independently. So I felt like there is a need for a transition. So currently I'm transitioning just by Kendrick Dean, but Wildcard has great significance that I can never forget or downplay.